Jeff?
Yeah.
So my home number is 679-0627.
Okay.
I'm going to turn my volume off, but if you need anything, just call the house.
Got it. No problem.
Have a good meeting.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
This meeting is being recorded. All right. Did I? There she is. Stop video.
Wow,
Mute.
we're doing great. We have a quorum already. Even 30,
There
yay.
you go.
So Jeff, you thought you might be late, but here you are. So do you go someplace or are you good?
I'm good. Yeah, my meeting ended early. Other meeting.
Oh, your audio is, but I'm not hearing. You're frozen. Or is everybody frozen? Maybe I'm the one that's.
I think it's you, Laura.
Hey, Dave, there? I think it's me.
Mhm.
I just turned off my video in the hope because everybody looks frozen, but I think it's actually me.
It's your video that has the problem.
I'll be back in a
Okay,
second.
I do think it's. Can anybody hear now?
I can hear you.
Okay, and I'm getting lots of
I
interference.
can't see you.
I'm going to totally exit and come back in again and hope that helps. I'm just going to leave and come back, and I hope that helps.
Oh, there she is.
Okay, I'm hopeful.
You're
So
good.
I think I heard David. Hi, David.
Hey.
Yay, I can hear you. There was no interference. Hi, Jeff. So, and in answer to my previous question, Jeff, so I know you thought you might have a conflict, but it turns out you're here. So,
Yep.
does that mean?
My other meeting ended early, so I'm fine.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, thank you. And hi, Mike.
Hi.
Michael. So I didn't hear back from Ed. I'm hoping that joins. I know Connor is not because he's on vacation. But let me just see if I heard.
There's Ed.
Well, Dave, you said you were talking to him earlier, so you thought that he would be
He's
here.
right there on the screen now.
Oh, is he? Oh, yay, yay. Wow, perfect. Okay, I wonder what, Ed, do you have audio yet?
Yeah,
Yay. So everybody's here who's going to be here because Connor is on vacation, so I knew that Connor would not be here. So I will, as usual, share my screen. Just do a share. And so we'll go with our agenda for today. So I did, so just an hour ago, I sent out the minutes from the last meeting. I hope to get more ahead of the game. And anyway, I just sent them out like an hour ago. So hopefully in the future, I'll be more ahead of the game. But in any event, the agenda, so I'll just say call to order. Well, basically 6:30, so we were pretty good on that. Okay, so the agenda that I also sent out about an hour ago is the status is I still have to send you a bunch of minutes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by email. I'm doing the minutes of the meetings we're having since then before the next meeting at least. So those are in your inbox. I think the only person I heard from was Dave Menzies, who approved the 426 ones. So if we do this by email, people have to email me with their response for me to count them as approved. So the minutes are not, a lot of minutes have not been counted. Well, the two most recent meetings are not yet counted as approved, and the other ones you don't have yet. The topics today, I want to talk about the building permit moratorium. I want to talk about the status of the laws in progress. Talk about the email that Ed sent, which was this, the sustainable community housing zone, single property floating zone. We were going to try to have a work session last week, but for various reasons did not work out. So I want to talk about this further, and then anything else we want to talk about with the floating zone. So, and that's it for today. So that being said, do I have anybody approve the agenda?
I'll approve the agenda.
Yay, second.
second.
Yay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Very cool. Okay, we're good. So that being said, I've already given you the minute status. So the status of the building permit moratorium is we're planning to have a public hearing on the first meeting of June. So June 10th at the town board meeting will be the public hearing. So the last time we talked, I had received the draft. I sent it around. I got some feedback I sent to the WEC, for whom I'm liaison, and also this committee. And I sent back different comments that came from different people. And in any event, now we're looking for the public hearing on June 10th. So that's the next step for the public hearing. Status of laws in progress is,
What
of
time
course,
is the public hearing?
well, the public hearing is at 7:50.
We need to talk about the moratorium.
Yeah, well, we'll do that. Okay, so we'll do that before we proceed. So the public hearing will be at 7:15, as I recall. The town board meeting starts at 7 o'clock. It'll be in person, and I'll have to go double check. I think it's at the town hall. I'll have to go double check that. It's either that or the community center. It's not at the Cuomo. That will be our first in-person town board meeting since the pandemic started. So public hearing at 7:15.
When
And
will you pass the moratorium?
when will we pass it?
Well, you could pass it the night of the hearing, but sometimes they wait. Because that will be important because you'll have 9 months. It's a 9-month moratorium, right?
Correct.
Okay, so last week, in the afternoon, I was at a meeting of the short-term rental committee, and Bill was there, and they, Hepner and Lauren Rose and Bill started talking about the moratorium. And Bill said that what he wants is within 9 months, some work completed on affordable housing so that anybody who might sue or feel aggrieved by the moratorium don't have a leg up to sue the town for a lot of money. So I told him about the floating zone thing we're working. All we have to do to satisfy McKenna, I think, is to, within the next few months, we have months, is to come up with a set of proposals for alleviating the housing shortage in Woodstock. So I think we're on good ground because we have ideas.
Right.
And I've been doing outreach here and there. So I can talk about that later. But I've reached out to the affordable housing community in Ulster County and gotten some response. So anyway,
Ed,
but-
Ed, did you say you met term rental committee? Is there such a thing?
Short-term rental committee, there is such a thing.
Okay.
So, so what I would like to share also, well, I'm still on the same agenda thing, but as I go, sorry, I just want to make sure that we were being recorded, and so, and we are, so that's good. So the other thing, and we're kind of jumping down a little bit. Well, actually, it is the first one. Sorry, I didn't cover the whole thing. The Woodstock Moratorium Oversight Committee. There is a Woodstock Moratorium Oversight Committee being formed, and that will probably be solidified in the same town board meeting on June 10th. So the quick answer to your question, Ed, I think we won't be sure until the public hearing whether or not we can adopt that law on the spot on June 10th, but it's probably a desire based on the public hearing. But there will also be a Woodstock Moratorium Oversight Committee being formed. Now, I know I had talked to Jeff, who's I'm interested in being on it. Jeff is interested in being on it. Ed, I know I had asked you, and I wasn't clear from your response if you're willing to be on it, because I think one email of yours said you thought you already were on a meeting on it, but it was actually the STR committee. So so Ed, you're on the STR committee and on the zoning revision committee. So having you on this oversight committee, and the idea of this moratorium oversight committee is to have a committee of people who is working on what are the laws changes needed, and let's go get the laws changes proposed so that within 9 months, we've got recommended laws written, we've had public hearings, and we can go through the process, because the law process takes, as we know from our two laws, first you have the law, then it goes to the planning board. First it goes to the town board and they have it for like 5 weeks to digest it. Then it goes to the planning board and they have 45 days to digest it. Then it goes to the county. So even from the day we have it all written, there's still probably a 3 month of process before you can actually make it law. So the 9 months becomes kind of 6 months, I think, because you got this 3 months worth of process.
No,
So
Bill McKenna spoke from his conversations with lawyers hired by the town.
Mhm.
Said that after the 9 months, we can stretch another 3 months. If we don't have our suggestions for affordable housing totally in place, we'll have another 3 months at the end to put in. And he didn't say anything about a law having had to be passed. He says what we need is significant progress on addressing the issue covered by the moratorium. And I think we're in a position to do that. I think Jeff and I and Dave Menzies and Connor and you can put together some proposals for alleviating the housing shortage.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I also reached out to Dennis Doyle of the County Planning Board, and he sent me back a nice email explaining some things. So, I think we're in a good position. We just have to hammer out some actual proposals. Like, for instance, if we decide to urge, like Kingston, to have a Woodstock land trust, then that's not going to happen immediately, but it could be a proposal that we convince the town board to enact, like Kingston, and a Woodstock land bank, and we need to figure out a way to keep housing affordable. And if we turn over housing to people and then they sell it right away and flip it, because everything is worth $500,000. I mean, I have friends who are living in $500,000 houses.
Right.
It's amazing what's going on.
You're probably living in one now yourself.
Yeah, I could say, well-known author, former thug, live rock and roll heaven, got a
Yeah.
waterfall. It's probably worth $1.5 million.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. So, but getting back to your other point though, about we don't necessarily have to have law changes, but I think that if we are going to,
No,
if
we
we're
need
going to have anything,
We need proposals,
we'll need,
serious, real proposals.
okay. So there's two things though. One thing is, yeah, we can have proposals for the laws, but so our end goal, whether it's the extra 3 months or not, our end goal is to have law changes, because otherwise, we might be able to do a land trust without a change to the law. So there may be tools or techniques or things that we put in place that don't require a law change. But I think if we're really going to accomplish what we want to accomplish, I'm expecting some law changes to be required. That being said, I've said to people, and they get tired of hearing me say, they get tired of hearing me say how long I've been a manager in my day job, but they also get tired of hearing me say how long I've been a project manager. And I've been a project manager officially since 1999. And what I will tell you as a project manager is always go to the original deadline. The reason that being, if you say, oh, but we can have 3 more months, is then everybody thinks that we can have the 3 more months. I believe I 100% believe that we need to be aggressive at going with the original deadline, because then if we need the other 3 months, it's in our back pocket. But we shouldn't start out by saying, oh, we can get an additional 3 months, because then if that's what we target for and we need more, we're out of luck. So if you ever hear me talk about this, I'm going to talk about the 9 months. I'm not going to be reminding people who have another 3 months. We'll probably need the other 3 months, but I'm not going to lead with that. I'm going to lead with, we've got 9 months, and you'll hear me always lead with, we've got 9 months, because that's my project manager experience saying. Otherwise, we're going to wind up, we got no cushion if we say, well, we got 12 months. We have no cushion if we need more. So you will always hear me talk about the 9 months. So, okay. Now, so Ed, so just a crisp yes or no. Are you willing to have us add you to this moratorium committee, which will have 2 zoning revision committee?
I told Hepner that he invited me on. I said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to.
Perfect. Okay. So technically speaking, you'll be an STR rep, because Jeff and I are going to be the zoning revision committee. And it doesn't really matter because you're on it. So, and we all work together. But that this way everybody will say, well, there's 2 from the zoning revision committee, it's Jeff and Laura. 2 from the STR, it's going to be you and Richard Hepner. 2 from housing, which somebody's going to be Deborah Dewan, and I'm not sure who the other person is. And then there could be a planning board. So yes, on the committee. That's perfect. And certainly every meeting, I'm sure, will be a public meeting. So if anybody, if Michael or David, if either of you wanted to come, we can certainly let you know where they are, and we're not going to throw anybody out. But our official, unless anybody has a big issue with it, our official members will be Jeff and me, and then Ed, you'll be an official STR member. And I'm very glad, Ed, that you're going to be on it, because I think that you bring a lot of value to every one of these discussions, and so thank you for agreeing. Okay. So was there more on the moratorium, Ed, that you wanted to say? I know you wanted to talk about it before we moved on.
No, I just wanted to tell what Bill McKenna said, that he had heard from town lawyers, that we have to get something in place by the end of the moratorium that looks real, that helps alleviate the housing problem. And I told him that I thought we could. We have a floating zone thing already in rough draft, and we have other ideas among us, and it should be fairly easy to do if we keep at it. And the thing is, you have to spend a lot of time. I've been spending hours and hours doing research and about this and that, and it just eats up lots of time. So you have to be willing to spend time on this.
Yes, agreed. So okay. I'll move on to status of laws in progress. So the planning board has 45 days. So I got those emails from Judy Kerman, which, as I put in the agenda, I did forward to everybody on the 10th of May. My thought is we'll wait and see what else we get from the planning board. They have 45 days to do their review. I think the 45 days is not quite up yet because it was at the 2nd April. And I'm just checking out my calendar. It would have been, sorry, just check, yeah. So it would have been the 20th when I think it was the 20th when we sent things to the planning board, 20th of April. So it hasn't really been 45 days yet. So pretty soon, by the time we meet next, we might have some news on that. Okay, so we're still waiting. Now, I know that when Ken was at a previous meeting, he said, oh, wouldn't it be great if Laura presented water protection law to the town board? And I said, Ed, how do you feel? And you said you could do it if it was desired. I'm not sure that I wanted to ask the group, I'll do what the group wants to do. If we think that there should be a town board presentation, and maybe there belongs to be one on the telecommunications as well as the water protection. I mean, I don't know if this is commonly done to have somebody put a law forth and it goes through the process, and you also do a presentation. Usually the public hearing is kind of what the community gets involved with. So I wanted to ask, I know Ken threw out there, oh, we ought to have a presentation to a town board meeting, but I'll either proceed with Bill and recommend it or not based on what this group does. Do we believe that there's a value to us, which would probably be Ed, because he's already agreed he could do the water protection, and he wrote the telecommunications law. So Ed, I'll ask you first, do you think it's something that I should be pushing for to Bill to get us on the agenda for you to present telecommunications and or water protection to the town at a town board meeting? Do you think that that's an important step?
Well, I mean, I could present the water law, but I wrote an email to Bill McKenna a few weeks ago telling, he and I had discussed that he was going to send this telecommunications law to a lawyer with the Association of Towns, because you went through it, Laura. You went through it paragraph by paragraph. It's a very complicated presentation, and there may be, there may be something in there that doesn't rhyme with another part of, I did my very best to, I had a big experience at writing these laws, but it is a very complicated law. We're dealing with 5G, and I think, maybe in adjunct with the telecommunications, we should call upon the town board to join the movement to call for a health study on 5G before it's implemented in the town of Woodstock. That way we can cover ourselves.
So if we called for a health study, and I'm making notes here while you're talking, so let me get my notes down. I
did a draft of it. I sent it to you quite a while ago.
Okay.
I can send it again. It's a very simple draft that I copied off the city of Albany, New York. And it's just saying that there are international bodies calling for a health study on it's a peculiar, very ultra high frequency radiation in hot 5G. And so they say that there hasn't been health studies covering this ultra high wavelength on 5G. So, it makes sense to, anyway. I don't know, I can go through the law, but I think Bill has got to get some opinion from the Association of Towns before he submits this for a vote into law. I mean, I am accomplished at this, but I'm not perfect. And I just want to make sure this is double checked by somebody who is in the know. And he said he could get a free analysis by somebody from the Association of Town. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay an attorney $20,000.
Right. Right. Okay. So sounds good. So getting back to whether and I'll be talking with Bill later on. So, or not later on tonight, but later on this week. So getting back to the question of whether, Ed, do you believe that it would be a benefit to us getting these laws passed if you were to present either the water protection or the telecommunications law at a town board meeting, say maybe 10 minutes on each? Well, maybe, I think they like presentations to be 15 minutes, but you're covering two topics. So maybe, 15 minutes and 5 minutes for questions. So
You need more than me. As you remember, in 2015, at an early meeting of our water, where we worked with
but
getting
Steve Winkley,
Steve Winkley, but there were two property owners there who had hired an attorney and were quite hostile to me personally at the water committee meeting about some language in the regulations to protect this ancient aquifer. And they, we have a banning of commercial water bottling. And one of the owners said, well, they someday might want to build themselves a commercial water bottling operation. Right. And we didn't discuss it further, but it has a ban on commercial water bottling in Bearsville.
Right. Which I think the majority of the citizens of Woodstock would want.
Yeah, but this one property owner, there's two main property owners there that are concerned. And one of them, his representative said,
Yeah.
Do you want a little chicken sausage or just the soup?
I'm in a meeting now.
So go ahead, Ed.
Anyway, I forget the name of the attorney. He's a local person, Ron Porty. And Porty's quite a smart attorney. And if he's hired by these two gentlemen again, like he was, he came to our meeting and was quite vociferous. So I would need somebody besides me to defend this, maybe Ken Panza.
Okay. So how we do it is a separate question of should we do it. So my question is, should we plan to have you, and we'll get you whatever resources you need, and I'll stand up there with you, hypothetically speaking, because we could be on Zoom, but we might not be on Zoom. In fact, and I think that you're not coming to an in-person meeting. So if we're going back to in-person meetings starting June, then I guess you would not be there presenting because you've told me you're just doing Zoom.
I'm not eager to. There's so many variants to the COVID that I'm really hesitant.
Yeah, no, and I respect that. I just want to make sure I know what the boundaries are. So
I'm really hesitant to go to a live town board meeting, but it depends on when it is, but anyway, I'm willing to defend anything that I take a stance on. But in the case of a town board meeting, if there's going to be a hostile attorney on hand, I can't do it alone.
Right. So my question then is, should we do it? And if so, I'll bring in Ken Panza. I'll stand there with you. You know more about it than I do, but I believe in it.
I'm happy to defend it. I think preserving that ancient aquifer is very important to the future of downtown Woodstock. It'll keep water pure there for the next 100 years if we set that area aside.
Okay. So if I were to recommend to Bill McKenna to go on the agenda, would I be recommending both laws or just the water protection law?
Just the water protection.
Okay.
Until he makes it. He's the supervisor. If he wants to present the telecommunications law, I think it's pretty good. If he wants to just throw it out there for public comment, that's fine. I don't mind. I think it's a fairly good law. I just am hesitating on the side of caution. You shouldn't propose a law that might have some crooks and hooks in it that explode later.
Right.
Or give,
Okay.
5G developers an unfair advantage through something we've left out.
Mhm. Right. Okay. So that's good. I'm good on that. So then the other stuff really is going into, so you had sent us the email. We were going to have a work session last week, but two reasons that got derailed. One is I know it was recommended that since this moratorium, and again, this moratorium oversight committee will not be initiated until it'll at least be June 6th before it gets initiated. So we don't yet have a moratorium oversight committee, but since Ed did send this document out and it was on May 10th, so it was before our last meeting, we were going to try to have a deep dive work session on it a week ago, but then that got derailed because people thought we should be thinking about what the moratorium committee is all about, and also then Ed couldn't make it. It was really, he drafted the law, so we did not meet a week ago. Do we want to have discussions on this now? Are people ready to? We can discuss it in our meeting in I think our next meeting might be 3 weeks away.
I haven't done any specific work on the floating zone draft that I created using Jeff's. I just bled Jeff's in. I didn't try to revise or add to or subtract from Jeff's 2 or 3 page proposal, but I did add a single building, single property floating zone to allow for affordable housing to be done in smaller units. So, I think there's other things to talk about, like the issue of that the housing committee has proposed, a Woodstock land trust, and associated also, there's also has to be a Woodstock land bank, but to see if there's enough will and enough drive in Woodstock to create those things. But the land bank would help assure housing remain affordable when a person moves out, and would not allow them to flip it and make a lot of money off of an affordable housing unit. Because it's a unit in Woodstock, and it's automatically, if it's for sale, it's worth $200,000 no matter almost what condition it's in, size it. And then I've been following the family of Woodstock has signed a contract with Kingston to build a tiny house project in Kingston. And they're working with an organization in Syracuse to build these small houses. And I think maybe we should bring Les Walker in to talk to us about tiny. He has a whole book out on tiny houses. I don't know, in other words, the whole question is bigger than a floating zone. It has to, we might have to do a land trust and a land bank, and we might have to have get family of Woodstock. I mean, they went to they're building in Kingston a tiny house project. Why, let's get them to build one in Woodstock. Michael Berg is a great leader. I've watched him for 30 years, 40 years. He's a magnificent asset. Get them to do it, because I contacted Dennis Doyle, because I knew him when the old zoning days, when I ran the zoning committee, and I asked him about the 200 units, and it's based on a 2006 study where they estimated that there would be over 100 houses needed and over 100 rental units needed in Woodstock to fulfill the overall county-wide need for housing, because the county planning board thinks of county level things. So he sent me the study from 2006, and I understood then where he's coming from. So I don't think we should feel obligated to satisfy the drive of the Ulster County Planning Board to satisfy that what they consider there is going to happen in the housing market, you know, but 200 is probably a fair, based on what Dennis Doyle told me, is about right for what we should shoot for.
But right, an increase of 200 housing units.
Yes, but that includes half rental and half ownership.
Mhm.
And I have this 2006 study he sent to me, so I can send it out to anybody. And also he sent a nice letter. He doesn't remember saying that the town needs to develop 200 units, but he agrees that that's a ballpark figure from his
Mhm.
point of view.
Right.
And,
So, oh, go ahead.
no, I mean, I trust Dennis Doyle. I worked
Mhm.
with him in the past. He's a real decent guy.
Yeah, I agree.
Just have a
I
couple
have
things
as well.
to add to what Ed said. Yeah, I think Family of Woodstock can be a resource. There, at a recent board member of the family, we talked about the idea of them expanding the role to look at affordable housing, because that's a critical need, and it's a need that is pretty much aligned with their overall goals. So I think they will take a bigger role in that in the next few years. I also talked with Kirk and Susan Goldman about the ADUs, which we discussed last meeting.
Mhm.
They're very much aligned with the idea of adding additional ADUs and trying to find an incentive to have people build those ADUs, whether it be tax
What's an
deferral.
EDU?
What's that?
I've forgotten what an EDU is. What is it?
Accessory dwelling unit.
Accessory dwelling unit, either attached or detached, either one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they're aligned that they feel the ways to do that are zero interest or low interest loans for people who are doing it based on if they agree to the conditions of keeping it affordable for a particular period of time. Again, those things have to be worked out in detail. They also feel another incentive could be that the town would agree to not reassess the property based on the ADU for a period of time, so that the taxes will not go up if you do that. I mean, I think that's one thing that's missing. It's not so much that that people can't build ADUs, it's that there's no incentive to do it. And I think if we can add incentive to do that, I think we'll start to get more in the town.
Okay.
But again, how to translate what you just said to language for a law is,
Correct.
that's the problem.
Right.
Yeah, and I do feel that it's important to have this moratorium committee, because I believe we'll have some legal advice in that. That's my understanding of that committee, because I think working all together, I think we all have the same ideas in multiple committees. I like this idea of having one overall committee that's going to work on all these ideas for housing and come up with answers and get some legal authorities and legal advice behind those opinions.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point too. Yeah, I'm just making a note here. So my question is yeah, sorry, fixing something here. So my question is, I mean, we've talked about a lot of ideas. We've talked about the floating zone. Ed has put together a merging of the floating zone document and the PRD, which we talked about going through, but we didn't go through yet. And so we've had it for a couple of weeks now. You know, we've talked about ADUs. We've talked about, you know, now we've talked about the tiny houses and about Family of Woodstock. He said sign a contract with Kingston to build some tiny houses. Maybe Family of Woodstock could help us. I feel like there are a lot of ideas floating around, but what I would hope to do is lay out the next steps action plan. Since this moratorium committee is not going to even be an official committee until June 10th, I think I said, or is it June 8th? I think it's June 8th is the second Tuesday of June. So we've got several weeks now, and we don't meet for another 3 weeks because we're the second and fourth Monday, and the second Monday of June is 3 weeks from today. So that being the case, what are we doing? What exactly? So we have some ideas floating around, but what actions are going to help us get where we need to go right now? I mean, one option is just to say, hey, wait for this moratorium committee to give us some guidance, but we've been doing a lot of work on our own. Housing committee's been doing a lot of work. I see the housing committee having done a lot of work on getting ideas out, and they've thrown some ideas our way, like the floating zone, but they haven't given us specifics about, when to implement, where to implement, how to implement. They've kind of shared some ideas with us. And so we've been beginning to look into these things, but we don't have a clear plan. And I'd like to have a clear plan of what our steps are. One step is 3 of us now are going to be on this moratorium oversight committee. I mean, what can we be doing before that committee gets going? Or what should we be doing? Or maybe we should just say, hey, we wait for it. But I think that we're more proactive than that. And we've got a lot of smart people on this committee. So my sense is we could be doing something, but what is our vision of what we should be doing before we meet next in 3 weeks?
I'm confused now about dates and times and meetings, because the second Tuesday in June is also the 8th. So do we have?
Monday, I might have misspoke. The second Tuesday is the town board meeting. Our meeting would be the Monday, and I might have said Tuesday by mistake.
Okay, got it.
So our next meeting is June 14th, which is 3 weeks from today. So in the 3 weeks until we meet again. So on June 8th, the moratorium oversight committee will get established. It'll get formalized in a town board meeting where people will be, people will be identified. It'll be a formal committee, and it will have a formal leader who may or may not be Deborah DeWan. But in any event, so before we meet again in 3 weeks, that will happen. My sense is that is there progress we can make before that moratorium oversight committee gets going? Because we've been doing some work. And are there things that we can do between now and
I
then?
don't see any need to do anything between now and the 8th, because basically that committee is going to be the one that has the kind of resources we need to answer the questions we need anyway. If we're looking at affordable ADUs, that's going to be addressed at that committee. We're going to talk about what the incentives can be. I don't know what we can do incentive-wise. I don't know if we can, ask the town to not reassess. I don't know if we have any place to get the low interest loans. So there's just a lot of questions that we need to ask. And I think a larger group that's looked at this from different angles is important to be there.
Okay.
If we bring what we've got to them, what we have are basic ideas that need to be developed and need to be
Right.
And I think the place to do that is with more people. And it seems like the more people are the people that are part of that moratorium committee.
Okay.
Well, yeah, well, I intend to the next, I've reached out to Sarah Brainard, who's the chairwoman of the Kingston Land Trust. And I'm going to find out exactly how a land trust is set up and who, I'm going to learn from her exactly the steps for creating a land trust. Because Susan Goldman and Kurt Ritchie wrote an interesting document proposing a land trust. It's a 4 or 5 page document she sent us in June of 2020. So I've been looking at that for now over a year or about a year. And I think we need to find it out. Now I'm like a trained researcher. I'll find out how to do it and forget a list of steps that need to be done to accomplishment, and ditto for a land bank. And then I'm going to investigate, like what Jeff suggested, how do we raise money for that? Can we lower what are the mechanisms for raising money? You know, what is the step for, you know, we could have a real estate transfer tax for land sales more than, say, $500,000.
Mhm.
But I don't know if you can do that automatically. You may have to pass that through the state legislature. Anyway, I'll find out stuff like that.
I'll also add, at the pancake thing on Sunday, I'm not sure if anyone else is at the pancake breakfast on Sunday. Kirk announced that they are starting a land bank. It's actually in process. They're getting the paperwork together. They're filing the paperwork with the IRS to get that done. I'm not sure the exact steps he's taking, but they're actually getting it moving. So if you talk with Kirk,
It's called the
Kirk and
Woodstock Land Bank.
yeah, Kirk and Susan are actually getting in process, that process going to get the land bank going.
Oh,
They
that's
expect it to
great.
be formed within 6 to 9 months.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, okay. But anyway, I'm doing my own way of looking and sleuthing out things and reaching out to people and getting answers. And I'll prepare a simple to read lists of different things, you know, and provide it, you know, to the group. And that's all, you know.
Mhm. Okay.
'Cause
Alrighty.
we need a lot of, to do an affordable housing thing in Woodstock, we need people who are dedicated to it. Like in Kingston, they have all these people that, and in Syracuse, New York, where they have a tiny houses movement, and they've started building tiny houses. But they need people in Syracuse, and they have people in Kingston that are dedicated to set aside time to help this. And that's the problem. We don't have, you know, we have some people like Susan Goldman and Kurt, you know.
We have volunteers, they have paid people. That's a difference.
Yeah.
They
So
do.
some of them are, I think, in Syracuse and maybe also in Kingston. They may be, some of them paid, you know,
Yeah.
Right.
given at least a modest salary to help defray some of their personal
Mhm.
expenses. So it's going to, you know, we have to inspire the community to volunteer to take part.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, right.
that's never easy because there's so many causes in Woodstock, you know, so many groups demanding attention, you know. So I think all we can do is open, you know, show what has to be done, and then we can start having public meetings, you know, and presenting it.
Right. Yep. Okay. So I think that we're, so I think we've done everything today that we were going to do. We know the timing is, again, I expect on the town board meeting on June 8th to have the town board formalize this moratorium oversight committee. I don't know when the first meeting is going to be, but 3 of us from here will be on it, Jeff, Ed, and me. And our next meeting is in 3 weeks. So so we don't have any work per se come out of this meeting, although I did hear Ed say he's going to do a whole bunch of research. And Jeff, I know you're doing research too, because you got your ear to the ground and you're checking out things. So I know people are doing stuff. So we'll and we may have more news about the 2 laws that are already going through the process. So we'll have things to talk about in 3 weeks, but we don't have any homework between now and then. But 3 of us may or may not have been on a meeting by then, once that committee gets formalized. Is there more you think we should be talking about at this meeting?
I think, if I may say something here, is I don't think you got all these things happening. You got all these balls in the air, and no one is prioritizing, the steps that have to be taken, and who, like, for instance, the housing committee. I mean, they have a purview of something there. I mean, are we stepping in where they should be, or?
Well, they're forming a land trust,
All right, but I'm just saying
or it's either a land trust or a land bank or both. But I think it's probably a community land trust.
but I guess I don't see this thing being prioritized. you know, what steps we should be taking. I mean, we're here and they're there, and you know.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the moratorium committee, is to bring us all together to the same place.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening, is because we do have different groups working toward very similar things, right? The STR group, the land, the housing committee, our committee. I think let's bring us all together to have one set of priorities and to build it out. It's going to be useful. Because I do feel, as you said, David, that we have them working on something that we're working on very similar, and STR is working on something very similar. So hopefully we can come together and have common goals in a single plan instead of 3 different plans that have to work together.
Yeah. And I think, so David, I think that what's going to happen is, in addition to what Jeff said, that we're going to be looking at things from the zoning standpoint. So we're not really, and I think that, you know, for a while there, we were thinking the same things that maybe housing was thinking of, or they gave us some ideas and we're thinking of them. But I think as this all evolves and matures, then we're going to get some better direction, because I honestly don't think that we've had, you know, we haven't had enough direction yet about these zoning ideas related to housing. We've gotten some general ideas, but again, the who and the how and the when, we haven't been given some of those, you know, we haven't been given guidance there. And so I think we're going to get some of that guidance. So we're not going to be stepping on the housing committee's toes, I don't believe, or anybody else's. We're the zoning revision committee. So when all this evolves and matures, and when some of these answers become more clear about what is the end result we're really looking for, we know the end result in general was the vague thing, but we need to know the detail of what we're trying to accomplish. When we get more detail, then we can go off and we can change the zoning law and make proposals of zoning changes. So I think I'm hoping that through this oversight committee, we'll get more detail about what needs to change in the zoning law, and then we can go rewrite to make those things happen. So I don't see us, I agree with you about the priorities. I think that they'll come out of this oversight committee. And I think that because we're zoning, nobody else is going to write the zoning law. I think that we'll be the ones writing it, but we'll be part of that committee to know when it's our turn to kind of take the ball and run with it.
The other part is that there'll be some intersectionality between the multiple committees. It may well be the case that our incentive to build an affordable accessory dwelling unit involves the land bank. Maybe they're the ones the zero interest loans. So we have to work together to make sure that both those things are in place before we do our piece. So there are those kinds of things that can go back and forth. If we're doing a small house development, that could be a PRD thing or a floating zone thing. So those kind of fit together too. So the idea of bringing it all together, I think will show us where we can work together, have both different or multiple different groups support each other and work toward making sure that they mesh, that all those ideas mesh in different areas.
Yep, good point.
Laura, can I ask a question? Sure. Yeah, I'd heard a couple of times tonight a short-term rental committee. Who is there anyone looking into whether or not the short-term rental law had an effect on affordable housing in the town of Woodstock?
That's a good question. And Ed, you're actually on that committee. Did the STR law affect affordable housing? That's a very good question.
I would say from my experience with housing prices, no.
Yeah, because they're skyrocketing.
I mean,
yeah.
Talk to me more about that, Jeff.
I mean, you look at the housing prices. The STR law went into effect, what, 2 years ago, year and a half ago?
Something like that.
And of course, the pandemic happened. That changed a lot of the underlying groundwork, but it hasn't slowed the housing increase.
Okay.
Yeah,
How about
that's my experience.
Well,
how about the utilization of accessory structures as STRs instead of long-term rentals?
That's a good question.
I'm not sure what the question is. Utilization of accessory structures as STRs rather than long-term rentals. Is the question about housing prices? I mean,
No,
certainly
this has nothing to do with housing prices. The town of Woodstock approved the accessory dwelling law maybe 10 or 15 years ago to allow accessory dwellings to be brought up to speed to be rented.
Right.
And what people have done is everyone who has an accessory dwelling, instead of renting it out yearly, is able to rent it out as an STR for a much greater number.
Correct. And I'm not sure what your question is.
My question is, we're talking about a lot of things, but my question is, the town of Woodstock implemented a short-term rental law 2 years ago. And in 2 years, we're talking about affordable housing not existing within Woodstock. Is there any relationship?
Well, I think that as Jeff pointed out, I think that the pandemic was huge here. The STR law has definitely put the brakes on, because one of the things that we want community, not commodity. We keep saying we want community, not commodity.
Sure,
and the STR law puts the brakes on people kicking out. People were kicking out their long-term renters,
yes,
because they wanted to have the short-term revolving door. And I know one of the people that I had talked to said, well, I get a long-term renter and they're a pig and they're a slob and they really degrade the property and you can't get them out, you can't evict them and they're a nightmare. And then we have STRs in the same unit and it's just perfect. They keep it neat. We never have any problem. It's you make more money and nobody damages your property. You don't have these bad tenants. So there is, people are still going to want to do the STR because people decide they liked it, but we definitely have the cap. We've reached the cap. We've certainly reached the cap for non-owner occupied. So I do think the STR law is helping put the brakes on people kicking out the long-term tenant so that they can rent in an STR fashion. But we still have more of that than we'd like. But I think that the housing prices just really have skyrocketed because of the pandemic. Supply and demand, all of a sudden there's a huge demand and there went the price. So the STR law, I think if we were really to know how did the STR law help, we would have to be able to have you compare each year being similar years, but the pandemic year was not at all like anything. So it's really hard to tell.
Interesting, Laura, would be to look at how many ADUs there are in the town. I don't know how many there are. If we had a number, how many ADUs are in the town, and I don't know if we have the statistics to know how many of those ADUs were long-term and how many are short-term through time. We probably don't have those numbers, but we could at least see if that was a change in the STR law made that change. But the bottom line is, we know there aren't enough ADUs. Because if there are enough ADUs, the price would go down, right? Supply demand.
Right.
So I think we need to look at
one main thing the STR law did was to prevent whole neighborhoods being absentee owner STRs. And
right.
There's like, you go to Nair Street, there's a lot of absentee, most of Nair Street is absentee owner STR up and down. And so they're going to sunset, they're going to propose sunsetting non-owner occupied STRs within 2 years.
Who's going to propose that?
Huh?
Someone's going to propose that?
It's a good question because Richard Hepner would, but he's not re-upping on the board. So I'm not sure which current board member is going to propose that. I know if Richard and Lauren were still on it, Richard definitely would propose that, but he's not going to be on the board in January.
Not until January, aren't they?
Because it just seems, when we're saying we need 200 units and we have 200 STRs, it seems like right there could be a possibility as to where we can get some housing.
Well, that's a good point. That's an excellent point.
But you have I sat in on all the public hearings for the STR law, and I heard that all these people who say that their personal economies are so marginal that they need to have rental from STR in order to afford to live in Woodstock. And that's and there'll be 200 people show up at your public meeting, very angry, very upset if we do away with, they're saying, I won't be able to live in this town. I'll have to move to Lanesville. I'll have to move up to Margaretville. So it's like nuclear war if we propose doing away. I personally don't like STRs, but I realize that people need to earn a living to live here. They have to survive here.
Just to be clear, the idea is owner-occupied STRs will still be available. It's just non-owner occupied.
Non-owner occupied, because by having a non-owner, you can only have one non-owner occupied, but they have ways of forming LLCs under different
I will
names.
say that I said this at a public hearing at one point and I got ignored, but anyway, yeah. There's ways to get around that.
Well, our non-owner occupied number, I forget what it is, but it's under 100. So our
It's
cap for
90.
what's that?
I've heard 90 is the number for.
Yeah, there you go. So that sounds about right. So our so if there's 200, there aren't 200
Right,
non-owner occupied.
And so, but a non-owner, but what I see is, and this occurred with my neighbor, I know it's anecdotal, but you know, they fixed up their garage, they they made it into a 1-bedroom apartment and they Airbnb it, as
Right.
opposed to making it into a 1-bedroom
Sure.
apartment that's for long-term rental. So if you're looking for rental income, you can still get rental income by renting your house long-term. But
Sure.
they get more money from so what I'm saying is a lot of these small 1 or 2-bedroom buildings that would be, you know, would fit into a somewhat affordable housing concept are being STR'd, and that they're considered owner occupied because the owner lives on the property.
Correct.
But it's the outbuilding that's being rented as an STR.
Well,
There's a limit on those, and I think that's limit has been reduced, I believe, too. And I think
Right, there's a limit on those, but that limit, you know, when we start looking at that, starts to, you know, it could immediately affect affordable housing in Woodstock, but maybe not.
yeah,
so
okay.
Michael, the question I would have is, I mean, what's really funny about this is STRs were actually illegal. When we put the STR law in place, it would take something people were doing that was illegal to begin with and put some boundaries around it and bring it under control.
Sure,
So
sure.
STRs were illegally done before that. And
Yep.
now the STR law again makes it legal, but also again puts the boundaries. So then what do we do? Like it would be odd to incentivize somebody, you know, now that they've already kicked out their long-term tenant. And your points are very, you may really be onto something here, because as you say, if you count the owner occupied and non-owner occupied, we probably do have 200 units of STRs. And if instead of being STRs, they were long-term housing, there we get the long-term housing we're saying we need 200 more housing
And we
units.
just change the law. We don't have to build and whatever.
Okay. So your thought is just change the law, not incentivize people, not still give them the option to do even owner occupied STRs. You're saying just change the law and don't let them do any short-term rentals anymore.
Well, I'm not saying that because I'm not for or against it, but I'm saying it is a possibility. Because the question is, you know, we were the first to put in the STR law. Okay, 2 years later, how's it working? Because it seems kind of, I mean, I know a lot of things happen in those 2 years, but now we're talking about there's not affordable housing because everyone who has a garage, it's a 1-bedroom garage, is Airbnb in it instead of charging $1,200 a month for a long-term rental.
Right.
Well, that's another question that I have is about who are they really checking the uses of STRs? Like, you know, you have so many, but are they actually enforcing that portion of it, that there are only supposed to be so many?
Well,
Yes, they are. They have a guy named Butch who's doing a tremendous job keeping track. He has a computerized list of all the STRs in Woodstock, and he's doing a great job as far as I can tell.
I have, for what it's worth, I have an appointment with Butch next week to get his perspective on the STR law and whether or not there's anything within the STR law that could use some modification.
okay.
Yes, Butch with the STR committee, Butch had a long meeting about 3 weeks ago and gave some input. But you're welcome to, maybe you should get in touch with Hebner, and we're going to have another meeting. I think we're meeting every 2 weeks. I think we're meeting next Monday.
Yep. So, and I do think at one point we were getting information from the county in terms of, because I think that there is some communication between Woodstock and the county.
Doing that. The county's no longer doing that. The county's no longer doing it that way.
Oh, so they're not letting us know who's on Airbnb?
No, in the past, the county went directly to the STR owners to try to collect their sales tax or their hotel tax, whatever it is. We no longer do that. March Gallagher, when she became controller, went directly to Airbnb and said, just pay us. You collect the tax and pay us.
Well, so is Woodstock getting any tax?
Woodstock is getting its share.
Okay.
Whatever, so, it's going to the county, which then gets distributed to the towns based on a,
Okay. So it's
Whatever.
being done without lists of who has the STRs. So
Yep.
there's a bulk number that comes in, and Woodstock gets its cut of that bulk number, but there's no listing of STRs, because at one point there was supposed to be, county was helping with listing of STRs. But
yeah,
okay.
but that,
Right.
you end up not collecting as much money as if you go straight to Airbnb. If you go
there-
straight to Airbnb, you guarantee you get the taxes.
I don't
And-
know about that. I've seen a fairly recent county list. I'll have to look on my computer, but
If they're keeping a list, it's not for taxes, it might be for the reasons, but because I know that March
I've
switched
got
that tax.
because we compared the county list with Butch's list, and there was significant difference. But
And
county is keeping a list, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
and
It's
then
not for taxes, and it's for other reasons.
speaking of STRs, there's the STRs. It's the STR host's responsibility to report New York State sales tax, and I don't think anyone is doing that.
Yeah, who wants to, right? But they should.
Well,
I
I mean, you know
should.
what I think is, if you want to do an STR and you want to start a business and start taking tax deductions against that business, you should operate as any other business does
Sure.
in New
I
York
agree.
State,
I agree.
and get an employee identification number with the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance with the authority to collect such sales tax
Yeah.
and submit those tax returns on a quarterly basis like any other business does, which also takes your entire personal books and opens it up to audit by the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance for sales tax collections, which should have
Right.
been done for the duration of you renting that STR, which weren't done.
Oh, no,
I believe if you work through Airbnb, they require you to have an EIN, and they require you to file to do all that stuff. I think they actually hold back the taxes themselves.
No, I've rented from Airbnb. The only thing they collect is the Ulster County sales tax. They don't collect sales tax.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, so yeah, lot going on there. So I am watching my clock. I know we like to keep
Oh,
these
yeah,
meetings
yeah.
to an hour. So I didn't know whether, I'm doing whatever you all want to do. If we want to continue the discussion, we can do it. If we think we're at a good stopping point, we can stop. We know we're going to meet in 3 weeks. We know we don't know if we're going to have a moratorium and oversight committee meeting before then, but the moratorium oversight committee we're expecting to be formalized on June 8th, and then we meet the following Monday. So anything else we want to talk about on this call?
Well, I think that talking about the STR was at least informative to me. I thought that they were checking it and making sure that they were a limited number and that no one else would be doing it. I mean, that would be the way to control it, was only allowing a certain number of STRs.
Well, that's
From a practical point of view, it's hard to do.
There are
That's what they're trying to do, but from a practical point of view, it's hard to do.
right. It's the goal. It's definitely the goal. And that's what
There's
Butch
like
is trying to do.
There's 10 or 15 major STR sources on the web now. And people are going on Facebook, and people are in Woodstock are doing their own internet offering for rentals. So, it's like cheating, cheaters can cheat.
Well, you're creating commercial units all throughout the town in residential districts.
Yeah.
Well, they're and I was talking to I think it was the building department, I think it was the building department. It's a commercial entity, but it's a residential use, because I actually went out to the old the Rainbow Lodge. The Rainbow Lodge owners, and they asked me to come out to the Rainbow Lodge because they have a bed and breakfast right next door. And well, this is a residential area. And I called the building department. I went out to visit them, and from their house, I was calling to make sure I was clear on the law. And clearly an Airbnb is a residential use. You're right. It is commercial from the standpoint somebody's making money, but it's a residential use. So an Airbnb, from what I understand, is allowed in an R5, R3, R whatever, because it's a residential use. The fact that it's a commercial venture is also a true statement. However, the use is considered residential. So you can't just say, well, somebody, because somebody's got an Airbnb, it's a commercial, and they can't be doing this in a residential neighborhood. Well, if a bed and breakfast is residential, I'm sure an Airbnb is a residential.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
As well. Yeah, so you could argue maybe it should be classified as commercial, but.
Or
the
maybe it
law-
should be classified as transient housing.
Well, maybe it should, and there's a case where the zoning law, we should be thinking about what do we do with the zoning law? Because if right now the zoning law says, if you've got a bed and breakfast, it's a residential use, that's what the zoning law says, and so that's what the building, zoning enforcement officer is gonna enforce, is they'll force it that way. If we think it ought to be different, maybe it should have a different classification. Well, that's up to us to decide if we want to make those changes.
Okay, great.
But right now, a bed and breakfast is a residential use, and it can be in a residential district.
Great.
So it's just food for thought. We can, I'm up for whatever this group wants to do in terms of where do we want to focus and how do we want to improve the town laws. Okay, all good conversations. I definitely thank everybody for being here. Anything else we do want to cover before we close? And great discussions. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just saying, fine.
Oh, I guess I should know who's going to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I'm sorry, I heard a laugh from David. And what did I hear? A motion to adjourn? I didn't hear it.
Motion to adjourn.
Yay, there goes Ed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yay, Michael. And there we go. So we are adjourned at, I'll call it 7:35, close enough. Okay. Thank you all. Excellent conversation, and we're evolving. We're learning as we're going along. So good stuff. Thanks so much, everybody.
Take care.
Yep, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Leave the boom.